Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 20th of December. Well, as we head into the holiday break coming up, the thresholds were clear for us. I mean, we had the 46.57, which was the ABM yellow, and below that level, we suggested that it was pretty fair to be short at that point, that the 46.13 was a critical level for the market because of previous algo activity at that spot, and that's where they would try and really defend that line. You can see in post-market right here, we're still a few more minutes in the post-market for futures before the weekend, just above that level. We traded below it, and that caught buyers each time, so it's going to be critical going into the beginning of the following week. What we saw was the magenta dipping below yellow early on, and once that happens, it's indication of weakness. The fact that we didn't even have white yet, MBI crossing above red, signals how significant that fade off is. We saw the rejection here on the DOC where cyan continued to rise. Now steel dips below that cyan, along with orange rising. That's an even bigger, weaker signal, and you already have green crossing below red on a daily. So, I mean, that's significant when it happens on a daily. When we start looking at that from 50K is also powerful, but you see it on a daily, then you see it on the 50, and then down at the 5K level. It all goes in tandem. From a YM standpoint, that was a full retrace of the big pump up that started from our white MBI reading before, and that breakdown also hasn't even achieved full sell status yet. So that means that you can still have a pretty strong reversal within it. The NQ was far weaker, already had that crossover of the red, and the expectation in that case would have been a move to the 50%, which pretty darn close to it, got some strength there towards the end of the session that brought it back, relatively speaking, still down significantly. Euro caving because the recognition is the Eurozone is still worse, and with the Fed really not tightening like they expected, it's held up pretty decent. So, relatively speaking, it should still dip below the 110 range, but may take some more time before that takes place. Gold saw its reasonable pop in a dovish pretend tightening setup, and finished at the bottom of the day, but still spiked higher. I would expect that it's going to continue to push around, still try and press towards getting back to that 100% range. From an oil standpoint, no real activity there. The real question now is going to become, is there a significant slowdown? And if so, to what degree? And can they quantify how fast it will go? And will the Fed reverse course? Which is the expectation of what a lot of market players are going to be thinking to buy the dips, because they'll just expect that things got bad, the Fed will step back in and they'll cut back on their idea of raising rates. Bitcoin, beautiful to show this because we had talked about the positive extreme fills going all the way, back on the rep at 64 down to the 48, and this continues to break down. Now we've hit the zero, which was the expectation off of the MBI white there. So at least that's been satisfied from that standpoint. The full positive extreme, if we go back to where this one was the yellow candle right there, down to 44 would be the next range. Came pretty close to it at 46. Overall low on the day was down at 45, 415. And below that then becomes 39 and so on and so forth, going lower. And this was the same call we talked about with ETH, breaking below that 4,000 was critical. They got a lot of support as soon as it did. Dipped all the way to 36, brought it right back up, but now that's become resistance up at that level. So still close enough, but not troubling. But again, we're seeing white MBI lead on that. Move to the 50% is expected from that range right there, but currently in a bit of a buy configuration going into the end of it. 50K standpoint, started out with the sell-off of that long buy from the MBI, and then it took several of the shorts, covered on that, and then we went into a little bit of sideways before moving into a short configuration. and the breakdown was pretty steady. We had the white MBI lead right there, which wasn't enough to bring it to the zero yet. We're still with MBI white leading, but you've got magenta crossing above, and you had the dip of the orange. So there could be a boost going into the beginning of the day. Let's adjust this 5K a little bit. And from a 5K, well, you can see it started early. The sell signals came in, and then it pretty much just read all the way through. An attempt at a little bit of a green, but there's no steel reset through a lot of this stuff. And when that finally did happen, it was under more selling with MBI white leading. And so every pop just became a beautiful opportunity to attack to the downside. And finally got all the way down to 45.88, and that's a critical one because breaking below the 46 became significant, and that's what spurred a lot of the buy setups taking place. And it was interesting, we had the lead of the MBI white at that point, but we had this solid build of shakeout, and then as soon as the move started with the green, it was right at the 46.07, and I pointed this one out. We started with positive extremes right at that level, and it just was blistering straight up, and almost like they were going to bring it green on the day. That thing just caught fire, didn't end, but then that second little wave that took place right here after cyan and green met a second time popped up, still more positive extremes. So then I'm just like, wow, add positive extreme, and then as soon as the early sells came, it's like, okay, well, let's just follow it one step at a time, and literally posted about that 46.07 target, which is exactly where it began, and literally closed it up just above the tick on that, and that's when we ended up with the brief turnaround, and that became bouncy back and forth. It still provided some short opportunities within it, and then a little bit later caught a secondary pump. And I'll just slide all the way across because, as you can see, that pump came on yellow, not quite positive extreme, but still enough to say, hey, okay, if I've got weakness, I know that I'm going to be safe enough to stick with it. And sure enough, popped down, popped back up again a couple of times, but stayed red within the overall readings because of both red MBI leading and white remaining above magenta throughout most of it. So every time there was a pivot of magenta, it was like one of those just, I kept attacking the setups, and you could just collect anywhere in between. This one right here was suggesting that when we did it at the 50% range that we should move towards the zero, and that's in fact exactly what happened. We had a brief moment where it looked like there was some strength building, and it started, but immediately put in some weakness literally right after, and right at the open on that one. So it was still right about zero on the long setup, but then that caved pretty darn fast. And then at the end of the day, we ended up with this short little brief pop, but it was on MBI red leading, so it's just a matter of waiting for crossover, and as soon as the white crossed right above it, there was an opportunity to attack, and actually worked out well, being close to 38% hit that, and that literally took us exactly back. Really filling in solid this time on the 46.07, whereas before we had two of these that filled in pretty decent on that, and every time it hit there, caught a buy, and in fact did the same thing here in post-market now, and we're about to close out there, but again we're going to see white up there, but magenta's still above it, so clean opportunity. Everything's been filled in and taken care of from that standpoint, so that just opens up for the beginning of the week to be fresh and new. Go with the readings. We saw the 50K slightly positive on that setup, so we could see a little bit of recovery from it. But overall, really, a lot of people took a beating on that from an option standpoint, given that a lot of it was at the 4,700 and 4,750 strike, and a lot of puts that were lower, that bounce up and down action allowed dealers to get in and out of things, and so then we kind of got the finalized settlement down here towards the 46, which probably was a cover point for a lot of those who had put action, and that allowed them to collect on that. So we'll start it again for the new week, but that was pretty exciting, nice and clean, and easy action for us from an intraday standpoint. As always, though, anything relevant, I will put up on our Skip chat and keep at it. For those that are starting their holiday early, enjoy, and we'll be back at the beginning of the week. Trade well. Talk to you later.